Dude, did you ever solve a Rubik's Cube?
How long have you known me? You know I'm colorblind?
Hello and welcome once again to the Darkened Room of Music Conversation. I'm Chris.
And I'm Darren.
Man, 1983. Talk about a major year.
Yeah.
If Ken Burns were making a documentary miniseries on pop music in general, 1983
Excellent place to start.
would have to be 10 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the magnitude
Yeah.
of the music that came out that year. Now, I don't know if it's that much, or if it's because I was 12 and that's the year that I started to become a musical sponge.
Well, I mean, when we were doing research for this particular episode, I was actually amazed at how much great stuff, how diversified it was, and how much of a lasting impact a lot of it had. So, man, I think 1983 is pretty strong.
Very strong.
Yeah.
And before we get started, I want to bring up some people that were born in 1983 that you may not know.
Okay. Yeah.
William Hung.
Oh,
what
Lord.
a great way to start, huh? Katie White is in a band called the Ting Tings. That's a group I really like.
Yeah.
But Carrie Underwood was born that year. Taylor
Bravo.
Hanson of the Hanson Brothers.
Yeah, I like Hanson.
Margot Price. She's a singer-songwriter adored by many, many. Sebastian Ingrosso. He's a DJ. Michelle Branch. Missy Higgins. Amy Winehouse was born in 1983.
There you go.
Donald Glover
Yeah.
was born in 1983. T-Pain was also introduced to the world in
Totally
1983.
legit. Sure.
And then Flying Lotus, which he's a rapper. So
Yeah.
all of these born in 1983.
Very cool.
Quite the impactful year.
Very cool.
All right, so why don't you get us started here? Where are we going to start in 1983?
Well,
Because there's just so much to cover.
There is. I kind of thought that the first thing we would talk about is the impact that I can't think of 1983 without thinking about MTV. It had been around for a couple of years by then, but I really think that, the growth of cable television in general, combined with just how it was mandatory that you made videos.
Oh, yeah.
I think that 1983, when I think about the heyday of MTV, it is seriously the first year that pops in my brain.
Yeah, I would say so too. I remember bugging my parents to get cable just to get MTV because everybody else had it, and I had fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah, well,
And the very first video I saw on MTV, do you remember yours?
I do.
Yeah, mine was Mr. Roboto.
Wow.
My mom was standing there, and I love this memory. Turned it on, of course, it was at the double arigato part.
Right.
And they were doing their dance on the stage, and Mom's like, what is this? What did we just pay for?
It does look pretty dorky, I gotta say.
Yeah.
My first video that I remember, I lived in a very small town outside of Nashville. I don't even think we had cable till '83. So when MTV came around in '81, the only place that I saw it was when I went to West Tennessee to visit my relatives. And a lot of people don't remember this, but like in between movies on HBO, they would show a few minutes of videos.
Yeah.
And the very first video that I remember seeing was Centerfold by Jake Osmond.
Wow.
Yeah, and I also remember seeing Def Leppard's Photograph. Those were two that I remember early on. And I believe a Billy Squier live video for My Kind of Lover or something. Those stand out as like the first three that I saw.
Yeah, what an impact MTV had on the Billboard charts. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Who do we have written down here? Oh, Duran Duran was introduced to the world.
I mean, the ultimate MTV band.
Yes,
if
absolutely.
you're thinking about 80s MTV, for sure.
Yeah. You had Culture Club. You had In Excess started to bubble up underneath there. Who were you thinking of?
Well, I was thinking about, instantly, I think of more of the rock stuff, but like ZZ Top, those videos were just so memorable. Sticks, you mentioned. Bryan Adams cuts like a knife. I totally remember seeing that. In the video, the girl in the swimming pool and all that. Remember? Yeah.
Yeah. Quite a few solo artists like that, Rick Springfield.
Yeah, the Police, and I can't help but think of like Come On Eileen.
Yeah.
Dexy's Midnight Runners.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of things. Total Eclipse of the Heart. That's another one that I think of.
Oh, that was epic. There's quite a few epic songs like that.
Sweet Dreams.
Yeah.
I'm just going off the top of my head here, and the list is endless. I mean, Men at Work was still big presence on MTV. It's a Mistake.
Oh yeah, they had some creative videos. That was one thing about MTV, is it caused artists to take their creativity beyond the recording studio.
Yeah.
Into television.
Right.
So we got some really creative stuff. We got some stuff that's like, oh, what are they doing? But it was so new and so experimental. Like, there were no rules.
Exactly. And then, by the end of 83, I would say by the fall, and then in particular near the end of the year, you really saw an impact of songs that were huge on there that just had crazy success on the pop charts. And one thing that came to my mind just instantly is the Van Halen Jump video.
Oh, yes.
And I think it premiered in, was it?
November of 83 is when it actually premiered.
On MTV.
But it didn't make the Billboard charts until like the second week of January.
And I think the album was probably released in December or January. I can't remember. Yeah. But that's a good example of a song that you instantly think of the video. The video was so huge and impactful, and it was directly, in my opinion, related to its success on the pop charts.
Yeah, and you saw that commonly during this era too. Is they would release the video to MTV a month or two before the single was even available to radio stations.
Right.
So they would build the hype on MTV, then release it to radio, and boom, almost instant success.
Right, and come on, let's face it, you can't think of MTV, just in general, an 80s conversation without thinking of the king of pop, Michael Jackson.
That is correct. That actually changed the landscape of MTV and pop music. At first, MTV did not want to play Michael Jackson because they didn't really play anything by black artists.
Black artists, that's right.
So
sad.
Yeah, Columbia Records threatened to pull their entire catalog from MTV unless they played Michael Jackson.
Right.
Well, obviously they're going to give in to that.
Exactly.
But it was the right choice. It's definitely what should have happened because, man, Thriller, what an impact that album had.
Yeah, and the videos were, I think it pushed the sales of the album into a whole different realm.
Yeah,
Without those videos, who knows? It's the biggest selling album of all time, or at least it was at the time. And it's probably still way up there. It may still be. We'll have to check that at some point. But then, also you had a lot of cool things that were happening. You had certain artists. I mean, once again, the first three artists I think of when I think of the 80s and when I think of MTV, I think of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
I think of Prince. And I think of Madonna. In 1983, all of those artists were represented very well on the charts, represented very strongly on MTV, and they were here to stay.
Yes.
And I think 1983 was the pivotal moment for those groups. With Madonna, you had like Lucky Star. I think Borderline came out that year too, possibly.
I think that was maybe a year before. I'm not sure. I didn't see that on the
could have been. Could have been. I know that MTV played those videos relentlessly.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
And then of course Prince. You had Little Red Corvette. Which that video was a live performance, right? Wasn't it more of a live performance?
It was more, yes.
Yeah, but still very cool and very memorable. But yeah, so that was the year that they were launched into the stratosphere of the 80s.
Yes.
For sure. There was a lot of genres that, were really strong on the charts, but really kind of set in motion the rest of the decade. When I think of like the pop metal movement or glam, if you want to call it whatever, you think
even hair metal.
Hair metal, that's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
Def Leppard. You can say what you want about them. Pyromania is one of the best albums that was ever recorded.
Yeah.
When I heard Photograph the first time, it really did change my life. I thought it was the coolest thing at that point I'd ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And that was really the beginning of that genre selling to the magnitude that it did, and think of all the things that followed after that stuck around way longer we were talking about this off air before we went live. It's amazing that pop metal stuck around and hung around as long as it did in that decade.
It is pretty incredible, yeah.
Because after Def Leppard, you had your Bon Jovi who debuted that year, Quiet Riot, Twisted Sister, I think was the following year. It wasn't far behind. Night Ranger, a lot of stuff, and all of that was a direct result of, I think, arena rock groups.
Kiss still had kind of a presence. They only made like number 66 on the Billboard chart, but Lick It Up, that
video
that came out.
Was huge because they had unveiled the no more makeup era.
That's right.
And so I remember that was a big deal. And they were on MTV a lot, like getting interviewed and stuff at the time because everybody's curious what they look like.
Yeah.
And then you saw them and you're like, put the makeup back on.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm joking.
Yeah.
And then you still had in 1983 you had a lot of your arena rock presence that was still going strong. You had your Loverboys and your Journeys and your Totos. Africa was released that year.
Night Ranger,
Night Ranger, yeah.
They were bubbling under. They were just not quite becoming a huge superstar name yet, but they...
Correct.
Don't Tell Me You Love Me, and You Can Still Rock in America.
Great songs. Pat Benatar was still hanging around with big time hits. Love Is a Battlefield, was that this year?
That was this year. Yes. Yeah.
So a lot of that arena rock stuff was still hanging in there strong. The charts were very diversified at this point. Even with your solo artists like John Mellencamp, but he was making really loud records that sounded good in big arenas.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yes.
And that was because this was the heyday of arena rock. And when you went to those concerts, everybody had their lighters on. I wonder if anybody's hair ever got caught on fire with all those lighters.
Oh, I'm sure it happened, yeah.
I saw a man get his mullet stuck in a ceiling fan once. That was a real mess.
Oh, God.
But anyway.
Would you consider modern English the new wave?
Good one, dude. Absolutely.
Here's an interesting note about I Melt With You. Came out that year. Huge MTV hit. You can't think of the 80s without thinking of that song eventually.
Of course.
On the Billboard Hot 100 chart, though, it only hit number 78.
Which is a great point. This was a time when you could have an MTV hit without it having success on the charts.
Yeah.
Sometimes they lined up, like we said, with like the Michael Jacksons of the world and Van Halen's and stuff like that. But sometimes it... you just had exclusive MTV hits.
Yeah, a lot of the songs that were bubbling up on the bottom of the Billboard Hot 100 is like Wall of Voodoo, Mexican Radio.
Yeah.
A lot of the Tears for Fears stuff was just starting to bubble under there before Songs for the Big Chair.
Right. So that's kind of a derivative of early alternative in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
However you want to say it, but yeah. So all of that was happening in under the umbrella of 1983, which is really crazy when you historically look back on that. But the R&B charts on fire. When you had an R&B hit in the early 80s, 1983 in particular, Lionel Richie. I mean, come on, the guy was just a monster.
Yes.
As far and he was gonna get even hotter as time went on.
Yeah, but of course that was the year that All Night Long hit number 1 for him. Yeah, so that's what propelled him into superstardom.
They played those songs for months on end.
Months
on end.
Yeah,
and who else hit the R&B charts that year? We've talked about obviously Michael Jackson.
Yeah, R&B artists that hit the Hot 100 at least. Bubbling under, you had New Edition coming out with Candy Girl.
Yeah.
You had, at number 66 was Midnight Stars Freakazoid.
Love that song.
Yeah, so you had a lot of dance-oriented stuff. But then higher in the charts, Rufus and Shaka Khan had a hit that year with Ain't Nobody.
One of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah, Champagne was that year, the group Champagne. Donna Summer had a major hit.
She works hard for the money. Yeah. What a great video, and what a beautiful woman. I love Donna.
Yeah, absolutely.
She was so gorgeous.
Yeah, Kool and the Gang had a big hit with Joanna.
Yeah.
So yeah, R&B all over the place.
Represented strongly.
Very much so.
And so, it was so spread out and so even at this point on the pop charts. It's almost like it was planned. It's just so weird how it worked out like that with all these different genres and stuff. And then, of course, I remember Elton John had a huge comeback that year.
That's right.
And once again, he was making big, loud records that sounded good when you play them live in big arenas, because this was the arena rock era.
He was indeed still standing.
Yeah, and I guess that's why they call it the blues. I believe that came out that year.
That was that year as
that's
well.
one of my favorite Elton songs,
Yeah.
and you know how much, and you as well. We both love Elton a lot.
Yeah, quite a few 70s artists that went on into the 80s had huge presence on the radio in 1983. You still had hits from Eric Clapton. You had Phil Collins bubbling under there.
Yeah,
with
I
his
Don't
solo
Care Anymore,
career.
right? He had.
I Don't Care Anymore,
Yeah.
number 39. Just scraped the bottom of the top 40.
Love that song.
Lindsey Buckingham had that Holiday Road in the movie Vacation.
Yeah.
That was released that year. Jackson Browne started his solo career up a little bit. Not really started it, but made an impact at the very least.
Yeah.
38 Special had another hit that year.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I definitely include them with the arena rock era.
Oh yeah, that's definitely an arena rock song.
Right.
If
And what
I'd
about
been the one?
Stevie Nicks? I'm trying to think. Did she have anything out?
Yes, Stand Back was that year.
Yeah.
And
was
there was
huge.
another
It was-
one, If Anyone Falls.
And that's
was
one of
that
my
year.
that's one of my favorite Stevie songs.
It really is.
I love that one.
One of mine as
I
well.
think it's very
yeah.
underrated. So yeah.
And hey, we can't forget David Bowie's with Let's Dance.
Oh man.
That was that year as well.
And you know, a lot of people look at that as his cashing in moment, which is fine because you got to pay the bills every now and then.
Yeah.
But that was still a great album. Of course, Stevie Ray Vaughan played the guitar on that record. A lot of people don't know that.
That's right.
I like the Let's Dance record and that whole era of David Bowie, but I like
too.
pretty much all eras of David Bowie.
Yeah.
So as you can see, 1983 was a very fruitful and diversified situation. It really was.
It really was.
And you look back at it now, and you're like, wow, I'm glad I was 12 or 13 years old while this was going on.
Right, exactly.
Because it was good, and I still like the majority of everything that we talked about.
Oh man, yeah. When I first pulled my list up, like 175 songs is what I narrowed it down to. I'm like, how am I going to do this?
Yeah, and we
It's
talked
crazy.
about on a previous episode how 1980 kind of set the table for the entire decade.
Yes.
And I would say next to 1980, 1983, when you factor in the MTV factor, is just as important, if not more important, especially when you bring up things like, the R&B artists finally being played on MTV.
Yes.
And all of that.
And speaking of MTV and impact on me, there was a lot of videos by bands that I'd never heard of. Saw the video once, it made an impact on me, and then they floated away into oblivion.
Yeah.
It's like I saw the video once, never to see it again.
It's weird how that would happen.
Yeah, years later I had to track them down. Like, what was that song?
Thank God for the internet, right?
Yeah, in fact, one of them I'll bring up right now is the group Planet P.
Yeah.
And they released that song "Why Me."
Yeah, and Tony Carey was in that band, and I love Planet P.
Yeah,
Tony Carey's good. Tony Carey had some solo hits too, so well worth checking out.
yes, and I'll just name a few more here. Martin Brawley, "The Salt in My Tears,"
one of my
that
faves.
actually entered the top 40, but
Yeah.
it was one of those that Martin Brawley had that hit and poof, he was gone.
Yep. He did write songs with Michael Bolton, by the way,
Ah, okay, so
he did. Yeah,
as a solo artist though, he was not at the front.
and with Night Ranger too.
And that was the year that I had first heard of Rainbow. And I remember seeing the video for Street of Dreams.
Oh
And
man,
really
what
loved it.
a great choice! Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then was '83 also Charlie? It's Inevitable.
It was indeed hit number 38 on the Billboard chart.
Right, and Charlie included a man that was kind of behind the group, Terry Thomas. He went on to produce a lot of stuff in the late '80s and early '90s. He produced all the Bad Company records that all sounded the same. But he was very good. And the Giant records, he produced those.
Yeah.
So he maybe launched some of that success into being a producer. So good for him. And then when I think of things that haven't been mentioned, some of my favorite videos and songs of the time, I really love Making Love Out of Nothing at All by Air Supply. I think that's a really great song.
I find it really funny that, produced by Jim Steinman.
He wrote it, yeah.
Yeah. But Total Eclipse of the Heart was released like a week and a half before that as
Right.
well. Essentially, they're the same song.
They really are very much as far as the feel and the atmosphere. But I think they're both
I
great.
still love them separately.
Me too. And you know, we talked about arena rock. One of my favorite songs from that era. I actually like it better than anything on their first record, and I'm probably going to get bombarded for this, but I liked Asia Don't Cry.
Oh, I love that song.
I really like the song. I think it holds up well. And I can't think of 1983 without thinking about how I listened to that song so many times.
Yeah.
So, wow, this is 1983 was legit. Very, very great year for music.
Yeah, I think there was one song that you didn't mention that I thought you might bring up. Hit number 82 on the Billboard chart, and I remember seeing the video. It was Fool's Game by the one and only
Michael Bolton. Yeah.
Doing his hard rock thing before he went all soft.
That's right.
And fluffy.
It's actually a pretty cool video too, and MTV showed it quite a bit at the time.
They did. Yeah.
And then you know, one other last artist that has got to be in the top 5 of 1983 would be the Police.
Oh yes, Every Breath You Take. That video was that not considered the first black and white music video?
Yeah. And it was considered for a long time the best video. A lot of people, it would win a lot of the polls and stuff. Mm-hmm. But one that had more impact on me was Wrapped Around Your Finger. I liked the way the video was set up.
Yes.
You know, when Sting knocked down all the candles, I
thought that was so cool. Like 12 years old.
Yeah, this is an image you'll never forget. So man, I mean, I think we covered most everything as far as artists that I can think of.
Just about. I mean, the other things we could bring up was, Huey Lewis and the News had their peak at that moment.
Sure.
That was the year of Flashdance.
Yeah.
That soundtrack, and you had Michael Cimbello's Maniac.
Great song.
Rick Springfield.
Love him.
Yeah. He was still going strong.
Making big arena rock sounding records. That's what he was doing.
Yeah. And Stray Cats was that year as well.
Oh man, the Stray Cats were so good.
Yes.
They were so good.
Yeah.
Brian Setzer, what an amazing guitar player.
Yeah.
So
I want to bring up the albums that came out that year.
Yeah.
That you can't deny that this was an impact. It was the debut album from Metallica, Kill 'Em All.
Oh man.
The album from Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, came out that year.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention them when we talked about the pop metal stuff or the hair metal stuff. Yeah.
And Europe's self-titled album came out that year as well.
Sure did. And it's actually a really good album.
Ozzy's Bark at the Moon, Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind, Dio, Holy Diver, Breaking the Chains from Dokken came out that year.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
I love everything you just mentioned. I'm a big fan of.
Right.
So,
well, speaking of albums, you want to move on to our favorite albums of that year?
Sure. You kick us off.
I'll kick us off. Number 5 for me was Under a Blood Red Sky by U2.
All right.
Now, I don't really like picking live albums in a favorite list, but this is the one that, like, oh my gosh, this group is cool. So I had to name it, even though it's kind of, it's an EP. And again, the videos from that live album on MTV, huge presence.
Yeah.
I thought it was so cool seeing them at Red Rocks, and it's like, I want to go there and see a live show.
Right.
So that's my number 5. What's your number 5?
Number 5 for me would be, once again, this band was sitting at the top of the world in 1983, probably the biggest tour of that year. I got to go with my number 5, Journey and Frontiers.
Very nice. Yeah. I loved Faithfully. Absolutely great song. Yeah. My number 4 would be Pyromania, Def Leppard. It was among one of the first few albums I ever bought on my own.
Right.
As far as, I remember listening to it because it was one of the first I bought. Yeah. And I loved the whole thing beginning to end. So I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, once again, I was way into the arena rock thing at this point in my life. So I got to go with my number 4. And you may laugh at them now, but for real, they were huge. And that would be Loverboy and Keep It Up.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, I'm not surprised at that at all. Now, my number 3 is by a group we actually haven't brought up, but man, that song and that video, it creeped me out, and I'm like, I was just drawn to it, and the whole album turned out to be fantastic.
Yeah.
The self-titled release from Genesis.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, that's on my list, too.
Oh, is it really? I thought it might be, but yeah, it comes in early on mine here, so.
Yeah. All right, well, Me too. So you go ahead.
Oh, was it? Yeah, wow.
Yep.
We got another one in the same spot.
Yes, we did.
That's crazy.
Yep.
All right. My number 2 is my number 2 just because of the memory of it. I remember my dad loving the band, loving the album. It was actually Sports by Huey Lewis and the News.
Yeah, I think it's a great record.
Oh, I do too.
And I think those songs hold up very well. So no shame in that game, especially when my pick is going to be Rick Springfield, Living in Oz.
Ah, nice. That was a great album too.
Yeah, that's my number 2. I love the song Souls.
Yes.
That's a great song.
All right, and my number 1 album of that year is not going to be much of a surprise. It's Synchronicity by The Police.
All right, nice choice, and mine won't be much of a surprise either. I'm keeping in the same vein as the hard rock arena stuff, Def Leppard, Pyromania, by a long way for me.
Well, there it is. There's 1983. I can't believe we squeezed it into a half hour.
Squozing.
If those are words. I apologize for all my shuffling around. I had a lot of notes.
Yeah, I mean, this was going to be a tough episode because you don't want to leave anything out.
Right.
I feel like we still left something out. So
we probably did, but hey, if you think we did, comment below and let us know.
Yeah, but what a great year. I mean, it's going to be tough to top this one as we go forward. So.
I agree with that.
Thanks for watching this episode of In a Darkened Room. You can find the link to this episode's companion Spotify playlist in the description. Darren and Chris welcome your comments. You can leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. Follow In a Darkened Room on Twitter to receive updates and submit your ideas for what we should discuss in upcoming episodes. Darren and Chris are also on Instagram, so give them a follow there as well. All of these links can be found in the description below. While you're there, be sure to click subscribe and ring the bell.
All right, random topic time, and
Let's
we're going to draw from the bowl this time.
Is it your turn to draw?
It is my turn to draw.
Let me hold it.
You hold it.
Hang on. Let me shuffle it here.
Shuffled, yeah.
Calm down. All right, here we go.
All right.
Never know what we're going to draw out.
You're right. Okay, here we go. Okay, dream musician meetup. Someone you have not met.
Okay.
And I would say it could be living or dead.
Living or dead. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, mine's still alive. Probably wouldn't have too much in common with this guy. I probably couldn't have a really strong conversation because he's way smarter than me. I would have to say if it was limited to a one-time deal, let's say I could sit and talk to anybody for 10 minutes, it would be Donald Fagen from Steely Dan.
Very nice. Yeah, that's not a surprise to me either.
Yeah.
Well, mine won't be a surprise either. David Gilmour.
Good choice.
Yeah. Now
Good choice.
Yeah. This Pink Floyd was, never much on backstage. They weren't really much about connecting with the fans other than through their music anyway.
Right.
But yeah, he is one of the few that that I would love to meet, and I haven't yet.
And I've always felt like he carried himself pretty well.
Yeah.
He always seemed like a good guy to me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Anytime he's interviewed, he seems very pleasant, very natural.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, I felt like that if I saw him in public, that he'd be approachable.
Right. So. And I did get to meet Rush one time, so that was a big thrill for me. That would have probably been on the list at some point, but fortunately I was able to check that one off. So
yeah, and I met Dave Grohl and the rest of the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
So that got that checked off my list as well.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have some of these guys on the show at some point. You never know.
You never know. All right, thanks for tuning in, guys.
This was so fun.
I loved this episode.
This was great.
We'll be back again with another episode very soon. Take care.
See you.